Good morning, everybody. This is Tom Bird. I'm the Fire Weather Program Manager and Incident Meteorologist from the El Paso office down in Santa Teresa, New Mexico. Today we'll be looking at the 2020 wildfire season outlook. And just for reference, this is a picture of me and Smokey taken late last year. We did a program on PBS and I was able to be involved. That was pretty cool. Anyway, so this is just for reference, see who you're talking with today. Okay, on this slide here, what we're going to do is we're going to spend a little bit of time looking back at last year and compare it to all the other years of record that we had in New Mexico, which is 125. So this is just an example of 2017, and the kind of way it works is if you look on that top left map right there, you'll notice that it's got the darkest red. It was 125th out of 125 years hottest. There was no other hotter years. And so the way that ranks is right there at the very top. Every other year is below that. So you see each year is ranked against all the other years in the same state. And if you look on the precipitation map, we hit 85, and so it kind of falls right there on the wetter than average, and you have all those dry years below. Okay, so now let's get into last year. This is the first 3 months, and this is how we're going to break it up. You'll notice on the left, temperatures were 88, which is on the high side of average, so they're above normal through this period last year. And last year, 81, so about 62, 63 would be the exact midpoint where there'd be half the years warmer, wetter, and half the years drier or cooler. So what you'll notice here, 81, just a bit on the high side of near average, but still very much near average. Down the bottom left and right, these show what it looked like the year before in 2018. So you can kind of get a reference point between the last 2 years, looking at how we ranked in New Mexico, and I also have Arizona and Texas numbers on there for temperature and precipitation. So here we go to the next 3 months. There's April, May, and June. You can see on temperature left, we hit 61, which is right there, almost dead middle. So very much on the near average end. And same thing on precipitation on the right, 68. It's very close to average. But you see the year before, 2018, we were very, very dry and we were very, very warm. So a big difference this last spring than the previous spring. So now we go to July, August, September when we expect to get a lot of rainfall. This is when we start our monsoon. But we were pretty dry last year, much drier than normal. And because we were dry, we didn't have a lot of clouds or moisture, and that helped us get some of the warmest temperatures we've ever seen. So you notice that New Mexico and Texas over here are at 125, which is the record warmest period that we've experienced in those states for the last 125 years. On the right, you'll see only a 13 for precipitation. That means 112 years were wetter, and only 12 years were warmer. All right, now to finish this off, the last 3 months of the season of the year, you'll notice we were a little bit on the warm side on temperatures, and look at this. All of a sudden, we've got a lot of rainfall across Arizona and New Mexico, much above average on the precipitation, and we were also pretty high the year before in 2018. So kind of weird that we didn't get the precipitation during the monsoon we expected, but we did start getting a lot of precipitation after the monsoon typically ends and we start to go back towards a drier regime. So if you look at the whole year in review, 109 was the temperature, so above average temperatures for the year, and then precipitation ended up being pretty close to near average for the year, which was better than we did the last year in 2018. So if you look at the month by month for New Mexico, and like I said, this averages the whole entire state, you can see which months were predominantly warm and which months that we were kind of cool. So the July, September, August was really a hot period for us across the state, and September was the hottest September we've had in 125 years. And on the precipitation, you can see this big dip here as we get into the monsoon, July, August, September. That's when basically this chart should be flipped upside down, where these numbers are down here at the bottom or up at the top. That's when we expect most of our precipitation. But you'll notice November, usually when we dry out, got a whole lot of precipitation. March also was kind of wet, which just like this year, it's been wetter than normal. that's how it was. Look at the precip maps and kind of focus across southwest New Mexico, eastern Arizona, and just kind of look month by month and try to see what your precipitation look like. This is percent of normal. So if the colors are reds, that means you're well below normal for that month on precipitation. If they're the blues and purples, that means you're above normal precipitation. So you can see January was dry, February was not too bad, neither was March. Dry over the Gila in April. May had some precipitation. June we started seeing the drying come in from that kind of continued in July, August, and then September we started seeing a little bit better recovery. We had a dry October, and then look at November, was really wet across the region. All right, now that we're at the very last day of March is the night that I'm recording this. So we've got 3 months in the books for 2020. So let's look real quick at the percent of normal precipitation month by month so far across the Southwest. Notice we started the year this year pretty dry. If you look at January, a lot of reds and oranges across most of the area showing below normal precipitation. In February, you started to see some improvement, especially across south and central New Mexico. And then look at March. March was abnormally wet across much of the area, especially as you go south and west, not so much across the northern half of New Mexico. But this is what precipitation has looked like compared to normal for the first 3 months of this year. All right, now let's look at drought. And we'll compare last year on the left to the current on the right. And if you look at last year on the left-hand side, you see that big, huge area of red and dark red over the four corners. That was extreme to exceptional drought conditions there last year. And you can see those oranges drop all the way down into the Gila. That was severe drought that we had over the Gila. Some of the Gila was in severe and some was in moderate. So we had some drought conditions going into fire season last year. Now, if you look on the right-hand side this year, you can see over the Gila, there's no drought conditions, not even abnormally dry at this point in time. We had average rainfall last year in this area, and we've had some above average this year. So we've kind of mitigated the drought over the Gila region of New Mexico and southeastern Arizona. And if you look north at the four corners, we've lost all that red. Now it's oranges and tans, which are moderate to severe drought. But we've really greatly improved the drought conditions across all the Southwest from last year going into this year's fire season. And if you want to look nationally, here's a look at the national map for the current drought conditions. You can see looking pretty good. South Texas is kind of lit up with some drought down that way. Of course, we still have the hot spotter at the four corners, but it's much improved from last year. And then along the west coast, there's some moderate drought that is hanging on from last year. So now let's look at the drought change over the last year. So 52 weeks ago, we look at what we have today versus 1 year ago today, and we see how many classes of the drought categories we have improved or degraded. And if you look at the national map right there, you can see that we've had a mixed bag across the area. There's large areas of the West that actually have had some degradation, so they've actually dried up over the last year. But if you look at the Gila, and let me zoom in just to the southwest here, you can see there's 1, 2, and even 3 class improvement towards the wet side over a 52-week period. So that's a good thing. All right, we'll wrap up the look at drought with a drought outlook. That goes all the way through June 30th, so for the next couple months. And if you look at the Gila, you see white, and so what that means is there's no signal that drought would redevelop over our area through this period, which would be close to the end of the Southwest area fire season. You can see that in the areas where there currently is drought, the Four Corners, the West Coast, southern Texas, and even abnormally dry conditions down in Florida, those areas, they believe they're going to either continue, persist with drought, or maybe even develop drought that they don't have right now. The Gila. This is just a quick look at the snow in the basins across the west, and this is percent of normal, so the blues are well above normal. The light blues and greens are closer to near normal snowpack, and the oranges, you start to be below normal. In this area, we're typically below normal right now. So let's move into the ENSO, which it's the El Nino Southern Oscillation. This is what the temperatures look like at the sea surface temperature across the equatorial Pacific region, just off our west coast to our south. We look to see if they're warmer than normal, which would be an El Nino pattern, what you see on top, or cooler than normal, which would be a La Nina pattern on the bottom. And I got X's on both of these charts because we're not either. It's important to note which we are, because what that does is it moves that Pacific jet stream, and the El Nino brings storms south, the La Nina moves storms north. As you can see, usually with a El Nino we're wet and cool, with a La Nina we're dry and warm. But we're under neither of those conditions. The sea surface temperatures are near normal. So this is what we're looking at. If you look at those three red boxes across the Pacific, right there at the equator, we're looking at that index. There's also one in the northern Pacific. There's one in the Atlantic. This is just an example. This is from many years ago. So these numbers don't matter, but this is the area we're looking at right there in the equator. And we're looking to see if those temperatures of the ocean surface right there along the equator is warmer or cooler than normal. And what we're finding, if you look in this little box here, this is the area we typically look at. They're very close to zero. They're a little bit on the warmer side of the zero, but they're not warm enough to constitute an El Nino. So what we're doing is calling this a neutral phase, which means we don't have either. This is kind of the trace of what that sea surface temperature has looked like back through time, going all the way back to last year in March. And we're on the far right now. And we're on the warm side. That heavy dashed line there in the middle is the zero or the neutral, where you had average normal temperatures. And we're high, but you got to be at least a half a degree above normal for 5 months for it to be an El Nino episode. So we're calling this neutral. So here we are looking at forecast models for the sea surface temperature anomalies right there in that Pacific region, where we determine whether we're in an El Nino or La Nina episode. The heavy line going through from left to right is kind of the observations that we've seen through time. And then when those lines all fan out with different colors, that's the model running and showing the output of what it thinks the sea surface temperatures are going to be. And they all keep them right there in that neutral band through the fire season and through spring. So that's what that means, and so the likelihood is for us to continue to keep those neutral ENSO conditions. And then here's another look at pretty much the same thing. And what this is, instead of one model having a bunch of iterations, this is a whole bunch of different models, each one with a different color line. They're all running, and they're doing the same thing. They're trying to determine what are those sea surface temperatures going to be going forward through the rest of the year. And you'll notice there's a little bit of spread there. Some of them actually drop well down into the La Nina region. A couple of them barely get into that El Nino region, but by and large, most of them stay in the neutral. So what we're looking at is for sure probably neutral through the spring, and then maybe a tendency towards La Nina as we get towards fall, but that won't have any impact on our fire season. And then finally, this is a really easy way to try to determine what the models are thinking as far as probability of each one of those potential outcomes versus neutral in the gray bars, El Nino in the red, La Nina, the cool phase, in the blue bars. And what you'll notice is through our fire season and well into summer, the gray bars are the tallest bars, meaning the highest probability that will be in that neutral phase. You'll notice we're kind of warmer than normal now, but not enough so to be El Nino. So you can see those red bars start to get smaller by time, and then you remember the models were trying to indicate all those trends going cooler, which would indicate a La Nina to come in for maybe this next winter. So we'll see how that works out. But again, once we get past fire season, and even right now, I don't think any of this really has a big impact on our weather going forward through fire season here in the Southwest. So now finally we get into looking forward through the fire season itself. And this is a 3-month outlook of temperature on the left, precipitation on the right, and these are anomalies, April, May, and June of this year. So on the left-hand side where you see all the oranges, that's a higher probability of warmer than normal temperatures through this 3-month period. On the right-hand side, you see that band of orangey tan colors. That is a band of area that it appears has a higher probability, not by a whole lot, but by some margin, of drier than normal conditions for our region. And so that turns out giving us a forecast for April, May, and June of warmer and drier than typical. All right, so now we go to the CFS, which is the climate forecast system, and we look month by month by month through July at temperature anomalies in degrees across the western United States. And so anywhere you see those oranges, again, that's a signal of warmer than normal temperatures. The white would be near normal temperatures, and the blues would be cooler than normal temperatures. So what you'll see in our region, for the most part, especially as you get into May, June, and July, is a broad signal for warmer than normal conditions for each of those months. You'll notice April to the north, we're the northern tier United States, the northern central Rockies, and most of the western United States looks like it might be cooler than normal, but we do have a signal down here for just barely slightly warmer than normal. So keeping with the theme of temperature outlook through the next 4 months and going to a different source, this is now the Climate Prediction Center, part of the National Weather Service and NOAA. This is what their maps look like across the United States. And again, they look pretty much the same for that April with, there's a signal for cooler than normal well to our north, but over us probably a weak signal for warmer than normal. And as you get into May, June, and July, that signal for warmer than normal temperatures gets stronger and stronger, where we're looking at a plus 80% probability that our temperatures will be warmer than normal, which means almost no likelihood that we'll see cooler than normal temperatures across this area from now through July. All right, now we're moving on to the precipitation outlook through July for the western United States. And anywhere on these maps that you see green, you're looking at areas where the model, this is the climate forecast system again, where the model thinks that that area will be wetter than normal for that period. If you see the white in an area, that's where the model thinks the precipitation will be normal or near normal. And if you see in yellows, those are areas that the model thinks will be drier than normal. So if you look for the Southwest, and through April it looks like a drier than normal period, and May you see a lot of white, so not a strong signal, certainly not towards wetter than normal, but the signal looks like normal to slightly below normal precipitation for May across the region. Then look at June and July. Maybe it's starting to see a healthy monsoon during these 2 months, especially later in June and sometime in July. Usually we don't see the monsoon really come into this area until the last of the first week of July. But they're starting to show some signal for some wetter than typical conditions, but not by much. You see most of the region by and large is in that white near normal precipitation. So I mean, it's better than getting a forecast of below normal if you're trying to avoid a bunch of dry conditions and increase elevated fire. Okay, so like we did with temperatures here with precipitation, we move on to our Climate Prediction Center and we see what they have to say about things. And you'll notice that equal chances, that big wide area that you see in most of these maps, it means that you see those 3 chances you can get right there in the middle. You can be dry, you can be wet, or you can be near normal. So with equal chances means there's no signal whatsoever to pick one over the other. And so you could find yourself in any of those categories, but equal chances often means close to normal, but it could fall any way. So you'll see there is a signal in May for drier than normal conditions, but other than that, they're going equal chances for all of the Southwest for most of this period. All right, now we'll just continue this out through November now, just for FYI. On the top are thumbnails of the temperature anomalies for August, September, October, and November. And again, what you're looking at is a whole bunch of oranges and reds, which continues the probability that most of the United States will see above normal temperatures through this period. On the bottom is the precipitation anomalies for each of those months, and you'll notice a whole bunch of white with very little signal for either wetter or drier than normal probabilities. So equal chances across most of the United States and certainly over our region through November in the precipitation forecast. All right, a lot of you may have already seen this, and this is actually old. This is issued March the 1st, so I assume that they'll have another one issued maybe even as early as tomorrow, April 1st. But I'm doing this on March 31st, so I'm kind of working with a little bit of old data from the predictive services folks, but this is what I have to work with and to present in this. So I would encourage you to take a look on either the SWIC page or the NIC page and pull up the national, significant wildland fire potential forecast and see what kind of update they get out to you the beginning of each month. So here's the one that was issued 1st of March, and we start with April here. And basically, anywhere you see white, there's, they're thinking normal, significant wildland fire potential. And so going through the next 3 months, you'll not see any red across the Southwest except for along the coast of California. So they're going for normal, significant, large fire potential across the region. So there's your April. Now we go into May, and very much the same, just normal potential as it was drawn up on March the 1st. All right, now here is June, and again, there's no above normal or below normal in the Southwest, so we're just looking at near normal according to the guys over at Predictive Services there in Albuquerque at SWIC. And like I said, there's a new one to be out in the next day or two, and so I would look at that for that one, and probably will include July on it. Okay, now what we'll do is we'll look at their text output, their little discussion on the Southwest for the significant wildland fire potential. And the first thing we'll look at is normal, significant, large fire potential expected across the region during the outlook period. And next, when we look at what they have to say about temperatures, they say overall with the neutral ocean setup, which we're under right now, typically means average high temperatures will generally be near the average to slightly above the average through this fire season. And the precipitation, they're expecting it to be near average through late spring with periods of significant variability across the region. That's what we've been seeing. I'll show that here in just a second. And then also they do make a statement on the summer monsoon. The long-term forecast models, they do suggest that there may be a stronger than normal summer monsoon across a large portion of the region, with the exception possibly of as you go east into West Texas and even the eastern portions of New Mexico. Those areas may not see some of that monsoon moisture to the same degree that you get it out west. And then finally, they do kind of have this kind of a disclaimer, a caveat, this, due to some uncertainty in the long-range data and given what we've been seeing in precipitation. So this is the precipitation anomaly for the entire years thus far in 2020. And they talk about some of these areas that may actually be brought into above normal significant wildland fire potential in the next month or two. And that would be the southern deserts of Arizona and the northern tier of Arizona and New Mexico. And if you notice the precipitation, those are two of the areas that have really not fared very well like some of the other areas as far as precipitation. All right, so we'll wrap it up here. That's what we got for now. Again, this was created on March 31st, and a lot of this material will get stale in relative short fashion. So if you have any questions, call the office at the number here on this screen and ask for myself, Tom Bird, and I'll be happy to help you with anything you need. Appreciate your time. I hope this is helpful. Y'all have a safe season, and I hope to see you out there somewhere. Bye-bye.